All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the show. This is Dr. Digital Podcast, the only podcast that addresses CEOs and business leaders who would like to increase their business using social audio. And I have a special guest today that I have Lane Kawaoka, who is also going to be talking about passive income. And it's a really big topic for a lot of people in my audience. If you listen to the end of the show, also get a free competitive analysis for you. So listen to the end and we'll have an offer for you. So with that, I want to introduce Lane Kawaoka, and he is also going to hit 4 points that I think are really relevant. So the 4 points are going to talk about counterintuitive wealth rules the rich follow. So everybody wants to know, how come the rich are richer? And they seem to be getting richer all the time, don't they? Another thing is passive investing for working professionals. You know, so many of us and so many people are working, but would like to get some money that way as well. Total financial wealth building for working professionals. And last but not least, passive cash flow investing, all of which I think are really relevant topics. And that's why I was hoping to convince Lane to come on my show. So with that as an introduction, Lane, thank you so much for taking some time out for your schedule. Tell us a little bit about background and really tell us all the tips that you've been able to accumulate all these years.
Yeah. So I currently own 8,000 rental properties, about $1.1 billion of assets under ownership. But it don't always start off like that. It's first started with that first rental property, but maybe fast forward a few years off that, going through high school and college, I was just like any person out there. You taught to go to school, study hard.
Yeah, sure.
Get some kind of degree and, plug away at that thing for like 40, 50 years.
40 years.
Investing in this like 401k nonsense and, just doing everything you're supposed to do until I bought a property that originally was to live in, which I don't necessarily think is a good idea for a lot of people.
Correct. Yeah.
And I started to rent it out, and that's where I got the taste of passive cash flow.
That's awesome. Now, you started out with a traditional career, right? So an ex-civil engineer, and you also then transitioned into this. So how did you come up with this as an idea, and how did you come up with this wealth rules for what rich people are doing? Because I think that's what a lot of people would find valuable.
Yeah, how I came up with this, well, this isn't rocket science, right? It's a basic commodity and necessary need for most people. And, you buy houses and people rent it. And most people these days can't afford houses to rent. We'll probably be moving more to a renter society in the coming years. And,
right.
I like I said, I bought that first rental and I was like, wow, I'm making a good amount of positive cash flow every single month of this thing. I'm going to do another, right? And I did. I bought another. And, around 2015, I had 11 of those rental properties bringing in some good money. And then I transitioned to larger apartments and syndication deals. It's all while still working my day job, or, people
right.
are out there, they're working on their business. But I think at some point you have to take that money, and if it doesn't go to your business, whether it's more pizza ovens or more paid advertising or whatnot to propel your business, making that wheel bigger, you got to eventually at some point start putting it to the passive side so your money can work harder for you. Once you get your net worth to a couple million plus, talking in theory here for now, if your money should be able to be growing fast enough where you could just eat the cash flow or the dividends, if you will, and you never really have to eat at that pile of cash that you built up.
Well, let me say, play devil's advocate a little bit, because I think people listening and people are doing what you're saying. They're busy and they're working. So how do you address then that working professional who says, yeah, I'd love to be doing this and I'd love to make a whole lot of money, but I'm working, and how do I find the time and the ability to go out and research and do the things that are needed to be done?
Well, then don't do it, man. Just keep working until you're gray and old. And that's what society wants you to do, right? And pay a lot of taxes. Or you could come over to the websites, Passive Cash Flow, check out the podcast. It doesn't take that much effort. Jeez, right? Put a little freaking effort into this. It's not rocket science to buy a rental property or go into a syndication deal and invest your money, right? You don't need a whole lot of time or energy. you need money, of course, right? Like we're not
Yeah.
talking about flipping houses, all this wholesaling houses that guys without money need to do because they got no cash. When you're a passive investor, it's more of like, how do you be time efficient with your time and to invest your money wisely into things like real estate, which are hard assets that produce monthly cash flow.
And how do you find these things? Because that was one of the things I said, and I thought about, like, how do you find those properties? Again, it's the busy person. So, I mean, I agree with your point. If you're too busy, then forget it. But how do you find the right market?
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? Like, I mean, we used to educate and train people how to buy little rental properties. What I realized over the years, and as myself became an accredited investor myself, is that when your net worth goes over $1 million, you definitely don't want to own little rental properties directly. And I'm going to drill into that keyword directly, right? You don't want to be the landlord. You don't even want to have a property manager between you because it's not scalable. Like when I had 11 rental properties, then you're going to have eviction or two every year. You're going to have some big catastrophe that happens every quarter with 11 rental properties. It's kind of like, having 11 sons, at some point you're going to have one of them go to jail at some point. Sure. Like
how positive.
I mean, it's a numbers game.
It's like a numbers game. Yeah.
Numbers game. And you're going to realize like you got all the debt in your own personal name, all that legal liability. It's a headache. And this is where like my journey, I've joined different groups, got around other high net worth accredited investors. And they all say the same things. They all kind of do the same things tax-wise too. But one of those is they invest as a passive investor, LP partner in larger syndication deals, right? Where a syndication will go and buy a 200, 500 unit apartment complex, and passive investors will be able to come in for a small portion and diversify over many, many projects and build their portfolio that way. They still own real estate at the end of the day, but in a different, more indirect type of format, right?
Yeah, because I can see the time commitment, like you say, and it's great to flip houses, but I mean, a person like me, I have no skills for it, and then I don't also run and put that much time into it. So that way, what you're doing is you're coming in as an investor with other people because that's where the cash comes in. You need people who can invest and get the money. So how do you build wealth, let's say, for a working professional, to keep that theme going? Let's say, your average person is listening here and they are working, they're doing the 9-to-5 gig, but then they would like to be able to build their financial wealth while they're working. What kinds of things would you recommend? What should they do?
Well, it all comes down to what do they net at the end of the year, right? Income minus expenses. If they're under like $25,000, $30,000, well, they got a money problem. I can't help out with that. My only guidance there is go make more money. I don't know, right? But the people I work with, they save over 25, certainly over $50,000 a year. And at that point, the next rung is, well, where's your net worth at? I would say if your net worth is under $250,000, $500,000, you may have to go and buy those kind of a pain in the butt little rental properties. That's what I did from 2007 to 2015. I just bought little rental property after little rental property, and eventually my net worth, went up, and I became an accredited investor. But if you're somebody out there that has a successful business, and you've kind of gotten your business up to a certain scale where you don't really need to put in any, you don't need to put in any big dollars into your business. Well, then excess dollars and maybe cash flow from your successful business can be going into passive investing at that point. Certainly as you become more of an accredited investor. And accredited investor is defined, people can look it up as somebody who has a net worth of $1 million or more, or they make above $250,000 a year, $250,000 a year. And at that point, from my opinion and from what I see from other high net worth people out there, it's getting into the game of finding these private country club deals that are syndicated.
So I think one of the other things that you're kind of alluding to is just really building a network anyway, right? So you get a lot of people who are sort of like, they're afraid to talk and they're afraid to get out there. But I mean, there's a certain amount of just basic networking. And, it's kind of like they say in real estate, there's only three laws, like, or three rules: location, location, location. Same thing with building a network. There's only three things you need to do, which is network, network, network. Find those people and get out there. And that's what you would say. So if you have a cash amount or an amount that you would say, this is a person who is ready to start investing with you, what could you identify, and how would a person go about finding the people that you're describing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to network, you got to get out there. But the problem is, like, there's not many places to find these types of people. You're trying to find other accredited investors and where are they investing in. And some of the worst places to go is like the local real estate club, or, a lot of the free online groups out there, right? Because a lot of these groups are filled with people who are broke, people who think house flipping and wholesaling houses. I mean, they hear real estate is a great way to get rich.
They do.
You're not going to find the people who have, 20, 50 grand to rub together, right? Like they just don't, you're just not in that group of people. And it's also not on the other side. It's not on the country clubs either, because the country clubs are just people who have high paid executive salaries investing in traditional investments, such as the financial planner, 401k stuff. And or they're trust fund kids that don't really invest their money, more interested in spending it. And this is where, we've kind of built a community of accredited passive investors that invest in, more blue collar type of boring investments where, it is backed by real estate and there's a prudent business plan behind it. And it's cash flowing from the start, not some kind of crazy venture capital idea. So that's what I would say, like, key in on the people that you're hanging out with. I mean, just like in the entrepreneur world, I mean, there are a lot of just random networking events out there. To me, it's kind of a waste of time, right? Like, you want to be interacting with successful people on your level. If you're not on that level yet, well, you need to kind of work on your business a little bit. But if you are showing revenue in your business of, even 5 figures a month, or even like $1,000 a month, for goodness sake, you got to find people that are showing those signs of success. And unfortunately, it's hard to determine the groups that are, just fake it till you make it people, or people who are showing some signs of success.
So do you have some suggestions or places that you would find, or what have you done, or what would you find a person who is thinking and they haven't been able to come up with that passive plan yet? Could you give them some steps and walk them through that so they get an idea of what you would recommend and advice you would provide?
Yeah, I mean, I would say get educated first, right? Even if you some chance found sat at a table with 4 or 5 other accredited investors investing in these types of investments, if you haven't got your knowledge level up to par, you're not going to be able to speak the lingo, and you'll just repel those networks and relationships. So, that's what we kind of built Simple Passive Cash Flow as a free resource for people to kind of go through and get educated. After then, it's kind of up to you guys, right? I mean, you have to kind of find other people kind of doing this stuff, and that's quite honestly the hard part. And which is why we have a closed pay-to-play type of mastermind group for that, because it's just so freaking difficult to find other accredited investors investing in this type of stuff. But I would say, get educated first, because if, your knowledge level is not up to par, it's just not even going to work. I think that's a prerequisite to getting going. And I think maybe even a prerequisite of that is get your net worth off the ground. Get it to at least $500,000, $1 million net worth first.
And then one of the other questions I have, I think a lot of people would wonder, since you're investing, and I guess there's a certain amount of trust level. Now, you've been able to get property all over the United States, not just in Hawaii where you're based, but how does that take place? And how do you get to that trust level and credibility where you can invest in a property that's, say, sight unseen or somewhere that you're not familiar with?
Well, we've started the podcast since 2016. And I think it was very authentic story. I mean, I told people how I lost money and what mistakes I made, and they saw how I was buying back then. I was still buying little single family homes, which, as I'm kind of telling the story today, I'm not a huge fan of if you're not, if you're already an accredited investor. Whereas I think that there's thousands of other real estate type of podcasts out there, right? And the intentions is always the same. It's more for what can the audience do for the person doing the podcast, as opposed to my intention has always been very clear. Just give out free advice and just help these people. And, that builds an audience. It seems to gain attention, right? So we'll do like free hot seats and put it up on the podcast. People vicariously listen in and kind of hear. All the stories are the same. I mean, this is not, no one's really a special snowflake. All the same, like all the lessons are kind of the same. Like we're all kind of misled down this financial path of go to school, study hard, get a high paying job, then invest in the 401k, which is all these kind of garbage investments that just make Wall Street rich, buy a house to live in. Oh my goodness, don't get me started on that, right? You should be taking your money and going and buying investments and then paying down your primary residence, right? That's exactly what the banks want you to do. You should be taking that excess money and buying more investments with that. But these are all like things that we're all misled down a path of the normal financial education. That's all wrong. That's essentially what keeps hardworking people working forever, and they pay a lot of taxes in the meantime. It's not the wealthy people, who are putting their money to the right investments that are barely paying any taxes. Rightfully so. I mean, they're following the IRS tax codes. They're following all the incentives that they're supposed to be doing. And like there's just a lot of misinformation out there. And what I realized as I started to join a lot of these groups, get around other high net worth people, is that a lot of the secrets of the wealthy, if you call it, are not that hard.
That's secret.
They're very secret, but they are very counterintuitive than what your parents taught you or what your coworkers are doing. Mm-hmm. And that's what I kind of set out to put out, on the Simple Passive Cash Flow podcast, is just, well, let's just clear the air. Let's just get rid of all these preconceived notions and let's let the numbers and facts, kind of show what's really the right way to do it. You guys decide, I'm not your financial planner. Financial planners just get paid commissions to sell you a bunch of garbage investments. Anyway. What do they know about building wealth?
Yep. If you could recommend some background in education, I know exactly what you're talking about. So here's a background in education, and I'm in those ironic positions. I have to say, like, why are you going to college? It's not necessarily the route, because you're going to be a wage slave. You're going to get the job, stay in there for 40 years, and then retire with your 401k. So that's not necessarily the way to go. But if you could recommend, so I want to kind of wrap things up, what will you recommend for educators? What do you think they could be doing now, let's say high school level, college level, to start saying, you really should be thinking about this as you did when you were in high school?
But like the teachers, is that what you mean?
Yeah. So what would you say that they could start doing to say, make some suggestions that they could start investing in, especially passively?
It's not their job, right? The educators, they don't have money. Why would you take financial advice from somebody who's not financially free? Unfortunately, that's how we all do. But I'm totally on board with you. Like, I'm not a huge fan of like the education degree system that we have, even though I've got like a master's degree. It didn't really serve me well. But you know what? Like the job initially, I worked my engineering job for at least a dozen years. That job got me money. I saved my money to buy rental properties. If it weren't for that stupid college and school stuff, I wouldn't have gotten that decent paying job out of college. Mm-hmm. And I think that for most people, they need to go find a job. They need to trade time for dollars, whether that's their own business or at a job, and save that money and to go put it to investments. And that's something everybody can do. A very small subset of the world can actually create a business. As we all know, most entrepreneurs fail. And most entrepreneurs these days are entrepreneurs that just can't find jobs. So
that's true.
I'm not a huge fan of school, but I would say go to
Good
school,
to do.
get a good job. It's a means to the end. If you do this right and you get a good paying job and you invest the right way, I mean, there's no reason why you can't get out of the rat race in 5 to 10 years and become a professional investor, kind of where I'm kind of at these days. Yeah, and that's to me is the quickest line. But you do have to kind of go through some different steps and hoops there.
Right. So it may be sort of like maybe that 25 to 35-year-old, let's say, that person who did go to college, saved their money, was frugal, and then was able to say, I've got this cash and I'm going to take this cash, and rather than live in the house, I'm going to start investing it. And so it's a little bit different path, but like you say, it's a means to an end. That's what would work.
Right. And another thing I like about the day job is like, you can learn and screw up on somebody else's dime. I mean, there are so many things that I learned through my crappy Fortune 500 jobs that I learned that I actually use in my personal business today.
Mm-hmm.
It's all in hindsight, right? But I think that there is some usefulness to doing that. You certainly don't need to do it for like years.
Yeah.
Right? You can typically pick up the skill sets and the insights from a job in 6 months, and then you move around. That would be kind of my twist on that whole thing. But when I first started as a new engineer, I was saving most of my paycheck
Sure.
for 5 years, and that's what really propelled me to buy multiple properties in the beginning. And that's a lot of this investing thing is, as you guys know, it's compound interest. And it grows like a hockey stick. If you can accelerate yourself to that beginning part as quick as possible, which is essentially just a money problem,
mm-hmm.
or money, you can get to financial independence very quickly.
Yeah, because a lot of the younger people it's the plastic problem. They're throwing out credit cards to you left and right, and then they find themselves under, and then they can't get out of that.
Young people and old people, right? They just can't keep a damn budget, right? They can't keep their grubby hands off their money, and they spend more than they make. And that's a different thing. A lot of people I'll work with, they've kind of gotten over that, or they grew up in the right habits where they do save 30, 50, 100 grand every year. Now, for those people, then they have to kind of get on this next stage, which is investing the right way, right? And not just getting into the whole Wall Street type of financial planner world.
Gotcha. So you got a lot of tips. These are like the secrets that are not really secret, but you're also telling people what they are. And since I want to sort of wrap things up, how would a person get a hold of you, and what kinds of things would they be finding that you can offer so that if they're interested, they can follow up and they would contact you? How do they get a hold of you, and what can you offer them?
Yeah, they can go to simplepassivecashflow.com. They can sign up for the club there at simplepassivecashflow.com/club. They'll get a bunch of e-courses if they're an e-course kind of a person. If not, they can download the audiobook, all kind of read, or I did an audiobook version for them at simplepassivecashflow.com/book. That'll kind of go over all this stuff pretty succinctly. But if they're a podcast person, they can also check out Simple Passive Cash Flow, Passive Real Estate Investing.
All right. Outstanding. So thank you so much, Lane, for being my guest today. We appreciate it. All these secrets that are not totally secret, but they really don't know. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for being a guest on today's podcast.
All right. Thanks, Vic. Thanks, man.
You bet. If you want a free competitive analysis for your website, you listen to the end. This is it for the Dr. of Digital podcast. My special guest has been Lane today. Until you next time, day is full.